Ευχαριστώ. Kalispera σας. Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here. Before I get to my formal remarks, let me just say, since this is the first time that I've had an opportunity, I want to express my solidarity with the people of Sri Lanka. And it is an example of the challenges we face globally in our fight against global terrorism. And our thoughts and prayers are with those who lost a loved one, including Americans who were lost in this tragic attack. Professor Poliadis, I want to thank you for your kind introduction and your warm welcome here in Athens. EPLO's leadership and scholarship in the advancement of public law in Europe is essential in an uncertain world with more and more autocrats seeking to flout the rules of the road, so essential to our economic well-being, shared prosperity and security. So please keep up the great work, and thank you for putting such a young picture of me on set. It was another time, I don't even know when that was, but in any event, thank you very much. I'm honored to be in the presence of such a prominent group of government officials, members of parliament, and representatives of the diplomatic corps. And in particular, I also want to single out my very dear fellow Americans who are here and have invested so much in Greece, Dimitrios Karaolidis, Panikos Papanikolaou, my dear friend Tassos Sambas. I also want to acknowledge the presidents of the United States Ambassador, Jeff Pyatt. Ambassador Pyatt and I first met in my visit to Ukraine when he was ambassador there. During that time, Russian troops were streaming across the border, the beginning of an armed conflict that continues to this day. Jeff helped Ukraine get on its feet during the darkest hours of its modern history, and I am proud of the work he did representing the United States in Ukraine, and I am glad that he and the U.S. Embassy team here in Athens are working every day to strengthen this critically important bond between our countries. He is among the best of our foreign service career personnel, and thank you, Ambassador, for your work on behalf of our countries. I'm honored to be delivering the 15th Manuel Chrysolatis Lecture here at EPLO. The legacy and work of Mr. Chrysolatis has been studied for centuries. He was an exceptional figure, extolling and exporting the knowledge and wisdom of the greats from Homer to Plato in the Greek language. His legacy serves as an inspiration to so many of Hellenic descent today who work in academia and elsewhere to breathe renewed life into ancient Greek tradition, language, and culture. His legacy also serves as an inspiration to those of us who may not have Greek blood, but feel a deep connection to all that Hellenic culture has contributed to our shared civilization through the centuries. And now I am here before you as someone who believes that these contributions from ancient civilization, these quintessentially Greek values, truly do underpin the international order in our modern day and provide the basis for democracy and the rule of law around the world. I serve as the ranking Democrat, the ranking member, the top Democrat on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, a position that gives me a purview over the conduct of U.S. foreign policy across the world. On our committee, we continuously examine our core interests as a country. Who are our true allies and our strategic alliances? Who are our competitors? Who are our adversaries? How do we implement a foreign policy that contributes to a safer world, one that is more prosperous, one with more open societies, one that is more democratic? And as you are well aware, the challenges in U.S. foreign policy abound: a rising China, a revanchist Russia, terrorism, the war in Afghanistan, a dictatorship in Venezuela, nuclear arms in North Korea, just to mention a few. I say that in the 27 years that I have sat doing foreign policy in the United States Congress, I have never seen from the committee's perch the challenges, the confluence of global challenges have never been greater since the Cold War. To confront these problems, we need allies and friends in democratic countries, countries that share our values of democracy, our respect for human rights and open economies, countries that share a deep respect for the rule of law, countries that share our outlook on security. I'm here to propose that the Eastern Mediterranean as a region is a place where we can find such friends, a region where democracy was born, a region with allies that share our values, a region of unique geostrategic possibility as a bridge between East and West. So much possibility. But also a place where Russia and China have increasingly sought to exert power and influence. Over the course of my 27 years in the House of Representatives and in the Senate, I have been a stalwart supporter of deep American bonds with Greece, with Cyprus, with Israel, and others in the region. These bonds are rooted in rich and vibrant diasporas and shared abiding faith in democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. And I am proud to stand before you and say that this truly is the dawn of a new day in the Eastern Mediterranean. The possibilities for energy, for security cooperation, and prosperity have never been brighter. The opportunities to deepen the security ties that bring peace, security, and prosperity have never been more promising. These possibilities exist if we are willing to seize them, if we have a plan, if we first and foremost simply show up, compete, and demonstrate that the United States is a reliable partner and engaged ally. So that's what I'd like to share with you tonight. My assessment of the challenges in countries like Turkey, China, and Russia, and my proposal for how we work together on a strategy that promotes peace and prosperity in the Eastern Mediterranean. Let's start with those challenges and an acknowledgement that they are real and in some respects growing. Some of the most deep-seated problems in the region, unfortunately, have roots in Turkey under President Erdogan. The 2016 coup attempt and its aftermath have debilitated the democratic process in the country. Hundreds of academics, opposition activists, and journalists languish in prison. In fact, Turkey leads the world with the most jailed journalists. Recently, Human Rights Watch reported that Turkey is arbitrarily jailing hundreds of lawyers. Targeting lawyers is a tactic from the worst of oppressive regimes, not what we expect from a NATO ally. Included among the imprisoned are American citizens and employees of the United States Embassy. This is simply unacceptable. Bogus charges against and essentially hostage-taking of U.S. citizens and mission employees are not the actions of a friend. As the most basic standard, U.S. citizens and employees and their families at our missions across the world must feel safe and secure. They should feel safest, and I can't stress this enough, they should feel safest within the borders of a NATO ally. But that is not the case in today's Turkey. President Erdogan's warming relationship with Moscow is disturbing on many levels. First, the Kremlin is an adversary of NATO and has made its intentions crystal clear on the world stage. Its invasion of Ukraine, its attack upon the U.S. 2016 presidential elections, its chemical weapons attack in the United Kingdom. This is not a responsible actor. This is not a reliable partner. And yet Turkey insists on treating it as such. And as Turkey seeks favor with Russia over the situation in Syria, the ties have grown stronger in other areas. Turkey's unfathomable intention to purchase the S-400 missile system is dangerous in the context of NATO and reckless in the context of its own long-term security. Let me make two things absolutely clear. If Turkey takes the S-400 for delivery, it will be sanctioned under a U.S. law that I was a co-author of, which penalizes significant transactions with the Russian defense sector. The law is clear and unambiguous. These sanctions could have devastating consequences for Turkey's economy and defense sector. Second, if Turkey takes delivery of the S-400, it will not have access to the F-35 fighter jet. That plain fact is very clear. There is no scenario in which an F-35 will be parked next to an S-400 system. No. And as soon as President Erdogan comes to this realization, the better off we will all be. This view is held by the administration and a broad bipartisan support in both the House and the Senate. Rarely do we find such consensus on such a significant issue. As you all in this room are acutely aware, the challenges posed by Turkey extends to how it treats its closest neighbors. We see this in the exclusive economic zone of Cyprus. Turkey Turkey's potential interference there is unacceptable. The Republic of Cyprus is well within its right to explore for energy within its exclusive economic zone, and the United States, as well as the private sector, must be prepared to support those efforts in word and in deed. Turkish violations of Greek airspace over the Aegean are dangerous, reckless, and could result in a miscalculation that plunges the region into conflict. Again, this is not acceptable behavior from a NATO ally. It is not the behavior of a responsible nation, and God forbid Turkey's brazen actions were to result in the loss of life on Greek islands in the Aegean. Turkey's behavior in recent years requires that we ask some fundamental questions. Does it indeed want to be a democracy? Does it indeed want to be a member of NATO in all of its terms? Does it indeed see a future in the West? I hope that Turkey will reorient itself. I hope that it will return to a democratic path. I hope that it will return to being a constructive member of NATO. I hope that its future is with the West. These are hopes that are shared by leaders that I have spoken to across Greece and Cyprus who want a peaceful future with a constructive, democratic, and secular Turkey. But hope is not a strategy, nor can it be a policy. A strategy for the Eastern Mediterranean need not be anti-Turkey, but any realistic strategy does need to be clear-eyed. It needs to consider the best way to mitigate the challenges posed by Ankara. It needs contingencies. Now, some have asked me why my legislative effort takes place now. And some have asked me, is it in response to Turkey? On the contrary, I believe that even absent the challenges posed by Turkey, even if we had a perfect partner in Ankara, building the security and energy architecture of the region is in our mutual interest and should be pursued. And such efforts are not unlike similar U.S. initiatives around the world. The region has also increasingly become a platform and crossroads for Russian and Chinese influence. As we have come to realize, China plays four-dimensional chess around the world, militarily, economically, diplomatically, and culturally. If you need an understanding for how China's Belt and Road Initiative will play out on the world stage, you need not look any further than the island-building campaign in the South China Sea. These efforts threaten not just regional stability, but the free flow of commerce, to freedom of navigation, to the resolution of disputes consistent with international law. Through its Belt and Road Initiative, China has used lucrative port contracts and supported bodies like the UN to grow its influence and win friendly trade terms. Globally, China's brand of international diplomacy is best described as manipulative investment. The U.S. may not be in a position, as well as the EU, to counter dollar for dollar China's state-owned enterprises or checkbook as it builds infrastructure around the world. But we also don't need to be. That is not where our competitive advantage lies. The U.S. needs to lead efforts with our allies to engage recipient Belt and Road countries and empower them to negotiate Chinese investment on better terms. America and our allies must also be present to create, shape, and set standards for the 21st century, or risk seeing the rule of law in these countries washed away in a flood of Chinese cash. It's not too late, but the time is growing short. Revitalizing the rules-based order that brought us peace and prosperity after World War II for nearly 3/4 of a century, and institutions built for the 21st century means dealing with the challenges posed in many different iterations, by technology, by artificial intelligence. It means being honest about how these advances can lead to economic displacement. It means reforming our institutions in a way that delivers prosperity and economic opportunity for all of our people. Our best hope at establishing the rules of the road for the future of global commerce is to work together. For example, the increasing prevalence of Huawei and other Chinese technologies in the European market is of growing concern, and it's akin to entering into a deal where the Chinese military is your partner, but also maybe your Achilles heel. I have similar concerns about Chinese investments in infrastructure. like the port of Piraeus here in Athens. What may seem like regular economic transactions can have serious security implications. While these ports may be commercially desirable, can they be relied upon on times of national emergency when the movement of goods or military vessels becomes critical? This requires the United States, the European Union, and the international financial institutions we set up after World War II to step up to the challenge, to be present, and to counter Beijing's efforts to snap up infrastructure. As I understand it, Greece engaged in the Piraeus deal when in the depths of its economic crisis. Had the international community woken up to the potential implications of Chinese investment at the time, perhaps something could have been done to support Greek efforts to find alternative investors. Likewise, the United States must work with our allies to counter aggression by the Russian Federation. Russia has made clear an intention to be more active in the Eastern Mediterranean and the Middle East, starting with its support for a war criminal in Damascus, to its aggressive efforts to use energy as a manipulative weapon throughout Europe. Russia has proven to be an unreliable actor, one that long ago decided to disregard the rules-based international order. As we saw last week, the Mueller report clearly described the Kremlin's assault on the U.S. democratic system. Russia's malign influence operations very well may destabilize some elements of the European Parliament elections in May. I've argued for years that weakness in the international response to Russian assertiveness will only invite more aggression from the Kremlin. And Russia's pressure on governments across the Eastern Mediterranean is real and sustained. It's unacceptable. But with no real multilateral strategy to address Russia in place, we remain flat-footed while President Putin charges ahead. That's why last month, Senator Lindsey Graham and I introduced the Defending America's Security from Kremlin Aggression Act, or DASCA, to improve our ability to meet the Russian challenge. The bill increases sanctions pressure on Moscow for its aggression in Ukraine, its annexation of Crimea, continuing illegal occupation, its continuing destabilization of eastern Ukraine, its malicious influence campaigns, both by targeting the oligarchs complicit in the Kremlin's malign actions as well as Russia's energy and financial sectors. Now, I know that there are differing views among our allies as to whether increasing sanctions is the right approach. But as we confront serious challenges from bullies on the world stage, we have to think about what is in our foreign policy toolbox. Unlike Russia, which uses its military as a tool of first resort to pursue its aims abroad, we, as peaceful democratic nations, seek to use peaceful diplomacy tools to change a course of actions of countries that are violating the international order. We have a limited universe of what those peaceful diplomacy tools are. The use of our international opinion to the extent that a leader or a country is truly susceptible to changing the course of events because of international opinion. Many autocrats simply are not. The use of aid and trade to induce a country to act a certain way. And then the denial of aid and trade and access to financial institutions as a consequence for violating the international order. Other than that, our universe of peaceful diplomacy tools are limited. So if we are to respond to violations of international law, then we have to come together in common cause to achieve the results that we want. In the case of Russia, these tools have not worked, so we resort to the tools of peaceful diplomacy outside of sanctions have not worked. We want Russia to be a different global player. We want it to be part of the international norms. We want it to observe international law. We want it to be constructive, but it cannot be constructive with so much of what it's done. So when people ask me why, let's remember the facts. Recent history speaks follows. The partnership with Maduro in Venezuela leading to untold suffering in one of the most prosperous countries in Latin America. The illegal occupation of Crimea, the attack in the Kerch Strait the use of chemical weapons against an opponent in the United Kingdom, the assault on the 2016 U.S. elections, propping up of a butcher and war criminal in Damascus, the violation of international law on the high seas, and I could go on and on. I believe Moscow will continue to push until it meets genuine resistance. Our sanctions thus far have failed to change Kremlin behavior because they have not succeeded in changing the Kremlin's calculus. Countering Russia's malign influence also demands more resources. That's why we seek to bolster the State Department's Global Engagement Center, the NATO-EU Hybrid Center, and other non-governmental efforts in the U.S. and Europe. All of these entities must be present, especially here in the Eastern Mediterranean, where the Kremlin clearly seeks a strategic foothold. So this is how I see some of our challenges to the region. From Turkey to China to Russia, they are real, they are growing, and it calls for the United States to be more present, more active, and more strategic. And it also calls for a plan. So what is our answer? We can't simply complain about Turkey or China and Russia. We have to offer a positive vision for the region moving forward. A good starting place is the legislation I introduced last week in the United States Senate with my colleague, Republican Senator Marco Rubio. The Eastern Mediterranean Security and Energy Partnership Act, and I emphasize that, we could have chosen to call it anything. We believe in it in a partnership. It sends a clear message from the Congress to the region and the world. The Eastern Mediterranean is a region of central importance to our country, and it must therefore figure more prominently in how we allocate diplomatic energy, engagement, and resources. Here in the Eastern Mediterranean, I applaud the work of Secretary Pompeo, whose participation in the 3+1 in Jerusalem last month was historic. I urge him to participate in the next meeting. The engagement must be sustained and also take place at the highest levels. Putin and Xi have proven ready to meet with the region's leaders regularly. If the United States is serious, President Trump must do the same. We cannot expect our views to prevail if we don't show up. Our bill has one overriding message. The United States should be much more present in the Eastern Mediterranean and support our friends. Let me start with Greece. Here in this ancient city, the concept of democratic government was born so many hundreds of years ago. And this proud Hellenic legacy has seen this country through wars and economic hardship. And through the centuries, this city, this place, has served to inspire so many around the world to aspire for a better democratic future for themselves. This was especially true in recent years, as Greek democratic institutions proved remarkably resilient in the face of devastating economic challenges. The recent U.S.-Greece strategic dialogue was an important step forward, and I applaud the hard work of the teams on both sides. I'm proud to say that under Ambassador Pyatt's leadership, our defense relationship with Greece is the strongest it has ever been. As a NATO member since 1952, Greece is a key contributor to the alliance, starting with its 2% of GDP spending on defense. Greece actively participates in Afghanistan, in the Baltic air policing missions. I commend its joint command at Thessaloniki's NATO Rapid Deployment Center. Shoulder to shoulder across the world, this partnership is essential to accomplishing our common security goals. The Greek-U.S. partnership at Suda Bay and other installations across the country truly do set a world standard for how security cooperation conducted on the basis of mutual trust, mutual values, mutual respect, and mutual security interests can be done right. But we have to build on this important momentum. That starts with investment. Our bill would authorize foreign military financing assistance for Greece to support efforts to modernize its forces and reach its 20% commitment for new procurement. The bill would also authorize funds for military training and exchange programs between our countries. Recent energy discoveries are having a transformational impact on the region. These finds need not be divisive. Indeed, they could be an important way to bind the countries of the region together. The Eastern Mediterranean Gas Forum is better facilitating relations in the region. Eventually has the opportunity to become an important political grouping well positioned to address issues beyond energy. At this stage, all energy export options should be weighed and pursued. The Eastern Mediterranean pipeline, if commercially feasible, should continue to be considered. The Trans-Adriatic pipeline and Greece-Bulgaria interconnector pipeline are on track to become reality. Both are proof that political commitment to energy diversification can indeed yield results. Every effort should also be made to explore options for LNG transit capacity throughout the region. In countries like Greece and Cyprus, with months of non-stop sunshine, although you've had more rain than at any other time, I've never seen the country as green as I've seen it, or in Cyprus when I was, it's probably never been greener. But nonetheless, with months of non-stop sunshine, should be leaders in Europe on renewables, particularly on solar energy. Our legislation would authorize the establishment of a United States Eastern Mediterranean Energy Center to facilitate energy cooperation between the United States, Israel, Greece, and Cyprus. We need to encourage the private sector to continue to engage in the region and do what we can to facilitate and support their efforts. Greece can and should also play an elevated role in foreign affairs. The opportunity is there, and we should work together to advance our common interests. Turning to Cyprus. We all aspire for the day when the island will be one, a bizonal, bicommunal federation where all communities and faiths can live together peacefully. And while the negotiators fell short at Crans-Montana in 2017, friends of the Cypriot people must continue to support a peace process on the terms set by both communities, on the island, and not determined or shaped by any outside power. If left to their own devices and without undue influence from Ankara, I have always believed that left to Greek and Turkish Cypriots, that in fact there would be a solution. The people of Cyprus, on both sides of the Green Line, should be allowed the right to determine their own future. Despite these challenges to the negotiation process, I am glad to see that Nicosia is charging ahead towards a new future for the Republic. It is moving forward with potentially historic efforts to explore for energy within its exclusive economic zone. The Republic of Cyprus is taking a bold stand in support of its sovereignty, a bold stand that we in the international community should and must be prepared to support. Cyprus is enhancing its security relationship with the United States with an important first step in the exchange of defense attachés at our embassies. We recently signed a statement of intent for cooperation across the board. The momentum in U.S.-Cypriot relations is truly changing with these developments, but now we must be prepared to put meat on the bone. We need to be prepared to meet the bold leadership of President Anastasiadis and his government with a commitment commensurate with our interests, one that rebalances our posture in the region, one that corrects for past policy shortcomings. That's why I'm leading the effort in the United States Senate to finally lift the arms embargo on Cyprus. It is overdue. It was the wrong policy under Democratic administrations. It was the wrong policy under Republican administrations, and it must come to an end. Any lifting of the arms embargo is not about weapons. It is an indication of political support. It is about treating an EU country with the respect it deserves. And it is an acknowledgement of the sovereign right that it has to defend itself. It is about acknowledging its ability to be interoperable with its allies so that we can maximize counterterrorism capabilities. Cyprus has taken important steps to clean up its banking system and diminish security ties with Moscow. But much work remains as Cyprus determines where its future lies, and we should be prepared to support any effort that seeks to have Kremlin influence on the island. And finally, in Israel, the United States finds one of its strongest allies, one with which we share an unshakable bond that extends to security, economics, and shared values. Israel's leadership in defense, energy, and counterterrorism serves as the essential anchor for these efforts moving forward. And that's why the trilateral dialogue among Greece, Israel, and Cyprus is so critically important. That's why U.S. participation by Secretary Pompeo in the Jerusalem meeting was so important. As our countries more deeply integrate on security and counter-terror, the region will benefit. As the three integrate energy exploration and distribution, the region and European energy options will be better diversified away from the Russian gas station. In conclusion, my friends, we have a tremendous opportunity to change the course of events for the better. With strong support in Congress to our legislation, The relevant players in our American system are focused and engaged. We are starting the long, slow turn of the American ship of state in the Eastern Mediterranean. But we can't rest on our laurels. We can't expect the policy process to continue on autopilot. We must keep up the momentum, and together we must make clear that there is no turning back. Tonight, in Athens, I come before you as a true friend of the Hellenic people. On a personal note, as many of you in this room know, my family roots hail from Cuba, an island country that has suffered for decades under the grip of an unrelenting dictatorship. I've always drawn inspiration from the Greek people, who set the standard for democracy and freedom that we know today, a standard that Manuel Chrysoladis shared with so many Europeans hundreds of years ago. Cyprus is also an island nation, one that has fallen victim to repression in the form of an external invasion. I deeply admire the resilience of the Cypriot people, so many of whom lost their homes in the north after the invasion. It is this Hellenic resiliency, this commitment to democratic values and the rule of law that is the basis of our renewed partnership. A partnership that will take a sober and clear-eyed approach to the challenges in the region and make the Eastern Mediterranean a more secure and a more prosperous place for generations to come. As we draw inspiration for the path forward, I would rely on the immortal words of the Hellenic philosopher Thucydides. He said, "The bravest are surely those who have the clearest vision of what is before them, glory and danger alike, and yet notwithstanding, go out to meet it. And yet notwithstanding, go out to meet it." That, my friends, is our charge. That, my friends, is our task. That, my friends, is our collective future. Together, in the face of glory and danger alike, let us have this clearest vision of a new Eastern Mediterranean architecture rooted in security and prosperity, one that could benefit all people of the region for generations to come. As androxime tin efkari. Efaristo. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator, for the inspiring words that you pronounced. There is now time for questions or interventions. I know that Ambassador Savaidis has something in mind for us. My idea would be that we gather a few questions and then you answer collectively, so we gain time. Ambassador.